ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski released a tweet yesterday around the future of Troy Weaver, and it kind of sent shockwaves through the Pistons community for a little bit. So we're going to talk about that as well as Blake Griffin announcing his retirement in just a moment.
Lane, skies a jam. Dynamite dunk and the crowd loves it.
Back to Pistons Intellect. I'm your host, Jack Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Jack_Kelly_3on3. And before we get into today's show, if you're feeling so kind, please hit that subscribe button. I want to continue to grow this channel. And as I said this morning and yesterday's episode, I appreciate everyone for their support and helping me hit that goal. Honestly means a lot to me. I love interacting with everyone. It's just been super cool this season, even though it's been a rough season, just to be able to start something new in YouTube as well as a little bit on Instagram. But for this platform on YouTube, just getting to know some different fans in the comments and interacting with you all on all platforms. I do Pistons content. So I appreciate all the love and a big thank you to you guys for your support. I appreciate it. So for today's episode, as I mentioned off the top, yesterday the Pistons held their exit interviews for players, and we also got the report from James Edwards III as well as Shams from The Athletic around the Pistons officially launching a search for a head of basketball operations. Now, we discussed that on yesterday's episode and all the kind of possibilities that can come from that. So if you haven't watched yesterday's episode, I recommend go back and watch that because it kind of ties into what we're going to talk about next. So the line of thinking yesterday was that Troy Weaver will no longer be the GM or the decision maker who has the final say of the Pistons roster moves, scouting, trades, all that kind of stuff. But around 3 hours after, I want to say, exit interviews and all the news dropping around the Pistons looking for a new head of basketball operations, Adrian Wojnarowski, or Woj from ESPN, tweeted out, Detroit Pistons GM Troy Weaver will remain in place as the franchise begins a search for a new head of basketball operations, sources tell ESPN. And boy, did this get people riled up. I think it's quite typical for on Twitter and online for people when they see news to react without necessarily putting a heap of thought into it. But obviously, we just kind of had the news drop from James that Pistons looking for a new lead man. And I kind of felt like as well, I think a lot of fans were waiting to hear that Troy Weaver had been fired, let go, or, demoted in some way. But I think when this tweet came out, Pistons fans a lot automatically thought that, oh, Troy's staying as GM for the long term. And I just want to, we don't know whether he's going to be GM or not. I think it's worth reiterating that James mentioned this in his reporting, and as we mentioned elsewhere, that it feels like whoever the Pistons select as the new head of basketball operations, that person is going to come in and have say over whether Monty remains with the team and over Troy Weaver and where he is in this franchise. Yes, there is still a possibility, of course, that he remains as GM, but it feels like it just feels like a new GM's on the way. I would be shocked if Troy Weaver is still the GM. Now, in terms of his future with the team, I think from the way Tom Gores has spoken and some of the guilt he might have around the Monty hire and not letting Troy have final say on that, I think I'll be honest, there's part of me that thinks there's a 30 to 40% chance Troy does stay with the Pistons in a scouting role or in a reduced role if he wants that. I feel like that could be a possibility. Now, obviously, that's only a 30% chance. So, well over 50% of me feels like Troy will be gone. And I think that'll be a decision from the head of basketball operations. I feel like they're going to come in and want to bring in their own GM or their own front office staff or make some major changes there. So, as it pertains to Troy Weaver as GM, Kyle Metz on Twitter. Kyle, I used to do some stuff with him for last season, and he's a really tapped-in guy with the cap and front office stuff. And I want to shout him out because he made some really good points on Twitter around why it's actually not insane or stupid or ridiculous to keep Troy Weaver around while the team looks for a new, some new leadership in the front office. And I kind of really like what Kyle said here is, he said here, another underrated aspect, of course, not firing everyone first, is it gives the new president of basketball operations an opportunity to get direct access to information about the roster, team culture, and other stuff during the process of deciding who to keep and who might not to keep. So I kind of, like, that's a great point from Kyle, because I feel like, you know, as bad as this has been, there's still value in getting information out of the people that are already there. And if you were just to fire them all right now, I don't think it makes a difference from getting rid of them right now in 2 weeks, whenever the new guy comes in. Like, I feel like there is still stuff to be gained. And I thought that was a really good point from Kyle, because, and look, I certainly, when I first saw that tweet from Woj, like, I was like, oh, wow. Because I think we were all just waiting for the Troy Weaver has been let go, or Troy Weaver has parted ways with the Pistons. Like, but to see Woj, the biggest newsbreaker in basketball, tweet out that he will remain with the Pistons as GM, I think just the words remain GM and Troy Weaver, fans just lost it. And that's so fair, because the trust with this organization, unfortunately, is at an all-time low. Like, I don't think fan trust with the Pistons will be any lower, whether it's about injuries and those announcements, whether it's around the GM telling us, you know, timelines and we're going to be competing there, and where it's getting letters from the organization. Like, just there's been a lot of promises that haven't been fulfilled, and it constantly feels like there's a lot of things that don't get spoken about. And maybe that's normal across the NBA, but I feel like with where the Pistons are at, and the last 15 years and the last 10 to 12 years under Gores, and the lack of success, it's just like you combine all of that, and fan trust in this organization is so low. So I get why when people see that tweet from Woj, they automatically think, oh no, Troy Weaver's actually going to stay. And I think he's going to stay as the lead decision maker. And I truly feel like, you know, this head of basketball operations, president of basketball operations, that person is going to have final say. And they will work alongside whoever that GM will be. But it feels like that's what's been missing the past 5 to 6 years since Stan Van Gundy left. And say what you want about Stan Van Gundy, drafting was really bad, but I feel like he made some really nice trades. Obviously the Blake Griffin one, which funnily enough, we might actually talk a little bit about here, but I know that was a bit decisive, but he made a really good move for Tobias Harris. He made, I even like his trade for Ersan Ilyasova back in the day. He made some moves, Marcus Morris, from the Suns back then. Like, he made some great trades. I think the Reggie Jackson one was a good trade. So I say all this to say, like, I just feel like Troy, I feel like in many ways he's been bad at his job, but it kind of feels like when you look at this in hindsight, having no president of basketball operations and bringing in a first-time GM in Troy kind of spells disaster, and it probably shouldn't be of too much of a surprise. We are here, and Troy's going to cop all the heat, and he should cop a lot of the heat because he's a lead man. Some things haven't gone great under him, clearly, on the court and off the court. But it kind of feels like he was set up to fail as well. So I do have some sympathy for Troy. And, you know, while I think he should be gone as general manager, I truly think that. I think there needs a full refresh. I think there'll be some things we might find out down the track that, you know, this wasn't all absolutely 100% on Troy. I think he's going to cop most of the blame, and kind of rightfully so. But yeah, I think there's further issues with this organization than just Troy, and I think he's set up to fail a little bit. So to summarize, don't be alarmed by that tweet from Woj. I'll put it in the description for those that haven't seen it. But I think it truly kind of means nothing. If you were hoping Troy was going to be fired yesterday, then clearly you're a bit disappointed. But I don't think it means he'll be here as general manager making decisions on this roster anymore. I think he'll just be here running day-to-day things, helping the new search in any way the organization needs him to find the new leader. And I think maybe, you know, I know people might not agree with some of his draft picks, but I will confidently say I think Troy Weaver has a pretty good eye for talent. That's something known around the league. That's kind of his strength. I even spoke to people in the organization last season who said, like Troy's eye for talent is one of the best in the NBA. So I think if he's going to be here helping scout talent for the upcoming draft, I don't know. That doesn't bother me too much. But long term, I think Troy will not be the Pistons general manager or in a position making decisions. So just want to clarify that. Hope that makes some sense to you guys. Let me know in the comments how you're feeling. I understand if fans are frustrated still from that news, even if you don't agree with what I've said. But yeah, I'm not alarmed by that tweet from Woj at all. I think new leadership is coming, and it's just going to be about how much they clean house and how much they keep. Hopefully, they go more down the path of cleaning house. Whilst I don't say that lightly in saying 5 people, I think it's desperately needed in that front office because whatever's been happening in the past 4 years hasn't worked. So, moving on, we got some news today that Blake Griffin is retiring. And Blake hasn't been in the league at all this year, I don't believe. He played on the Celtics last season and a couple of seasons before that with the Nets. But, you know, Blake Griffin, to me, I still remember watching like his rookie season with the Clippers and all the dunks, the Mozgov dunk, the Kendrick Perkins dunk, the slam dunk contest over the Kia. But I don't really, this is a Pistons podcast or show. So I just want to focus on Blake's time at Detroit. And I want to go back to when I honestly remember the day that the Pistons, when Woj started tweeting out that the Pistons are in conversation with the Clippers. I was at work. It was obviously approaching the trade deadline, I believe from memory. It was that 17-18 season where the Pistons had started 14-6. If you're a Pistons fan and you're in your 20s or late teens, that 14-6 start was like probably the highlight of the past 15 years. Or one of them, that stretch where just, I think for me, why that 14-6 stretch of that season sticks out so much, because it was the one time I truly, as a Pistons fan, have felt like, oh, wait a minute. Is this team like top 4, top 5 in the East? Like, that season with Blake and even that 15-16 season they made the playoffs, you kind of always felt like they were a 6 to 8 seed that season. Whereas the start of that 17-18 season, you had young Andre, he was passing the ball. You had Tobias Harris, he was looking like a young Melo. Like Reggie Jackson was Reggie Jackson. You had Avery Bradley. Like it felt like a real, like it just felt like it meshed really well, that team. But obviously it didn't work out. But that season, the Pistons started going downhill. Stan Van Gundy obviously wanted to shake the roster up. And I remember seeing Woj say the Pistons are in conversations for Blake. And I was so excited because since I was a Pistons fan in 2012, Andre Drummond and Reggie Jackson were kind of like the best talent the Pistons had to that point of me being a fan. And Blake is just like, at that time especially, even though he'd had some like injury issues, obviously, like 2017 Blake Griffin was like still, like I feel like he was a season or two just off finishing like third in the MVP. Like this was one of the guys. Like these, like he might not have been a superstar talent like a LeBron, but in terms of like cachet, like he's coming from LA, it's like Lob City Blake. Like it was like, holy shit, this guy's coming to Detroit. Like I'm just used to Andre Drummond scraping into the All-Star game as like an emergency like replacement. Like I've never witnessed like had a superstar player on the roster, and it was so exciting. It was kind of like when the Pistons found out we're getting that #1 pick, and it's like, oh wow, Cade Cunningham. Like, hang on, the Pistons. It feels like we're not meant to get these players. So it was just like, and then when the trade happened, like I remember like in the blogs on the Detroit Bad Boys, people were worried and thought it was a bad trade. And I don't really want to talk about whether it was a good or bad trade. I just more so want to reflect on Blake because obviously that season he arrives, the Pistons win their first 4 games. Him and Andre had some pretty cool chemistry, like running pick and rolls. And I remember being like, oh wow, this is just fun. And then they closed the season pretty bad, unfortunately, missed the playoffs. But then the season we'll all remember is Blake's 2018-19 seasons with the Pistons, where you just look at the stats. He averaged 24 points, 7.5 rebounds, 5 assists, shot 36% on 7 threes a game. 46%, like all NBA third team. Like he truly was a top 15 player in the league that season, and he dragged the Pistons to the playoffs. He had the 50-point game against the Philly. That was like in the first couple of weeks of the season. I remember he had like the 44 when he returned back to LA for the first time. And there's that video where he doesn't shake hands. He runs away from the owner, Steve Ballmer. He had that game. It was just like, he was fully like, I don't want to say he was LeBron, but he was like playing like the LeBron we see today, like the bully ball LeBron James that we've seen recently with him in LA. I feel like that was the Blake we had. Like it wasn't as like high flying. Like Blake could still get up and dunk, but it was more like he was just so mercurial. He'd back guys down in the post, but he also hit step back threes. Like I truly feel like that Blake was like the LeBron now, where like their defense was a bit suspect, but like in terms of playmaking, in terms of like just bully ball, being able to shoot the three, get to the rim with brute strength, like that Blake was, that's who like reminds me of the LeBron we see today, was that version of Blake Griffin. And like he just was, you know, it was fun to watch. It was like, wow, this is a true like superstar season we're witnessing. And yeah, that season, it was a weird season because like the Pistons started well, then they kind of faded in the middle of the season, but they closed really strong. And I feel like it was in the last week of the season, Blake goes out with the knee injury. And then obviously a moment we'll all remember is the playoff series against the Bucks, where game 3, he comes back. He's got a knee brace the size of, like, it looks like he's a robot, man. Like, that is so big. Like, he shouldn't have been playing, but he plays game 3 and game 4. Pistons lose both, but, like, he kind of won the city over in that series. And I feel like if you boo Blake Griffin or you don't like him, especially now that he's retired, like, I get it when he comes, an old player comes back to the arena and they might be, like, doing some antics and why you might boo him. Like, I wouldn't. But now that he's retired, I'd like to think that Pistons fans will really appreciate the time he spent in Detroit, because that playoffs, like, his career was never the same. He truly, I don't know if he rests and doesn't play in the playoffs, he comes back healthy. Like, I feel like that was kind of for Blake. I feel like he might have ruined his career a bit more than he needed to, but I feel like we were never going to see that Blake again, because it was just like, I don't know how many knee surgeries this guy had, but like, you know, regardless of whether he played or not in that series, he needed surgery, I believe. So yeah, it was like, I really enjoyed that season. And like, Blake came back, he missed most of the 1920 season. And then that's when the Pistons decided to blow it up. They traded Andre, and then he came back for the first COVID season. And obviously there's the buyout and he eventually leaves. But yeah, shout out to Blake. He gave us a lot of good memories. I feel like, at least us younger Pistons fans, or Pistons fans who joined the team later, like, you haven't seen much success. Yeah, Blake, I feel like Blake lived up to, like, you know, with the roster he had around him, because he never had any real talent. Like, he never had the talent to actually go and really make a top 4 push in the East. Like, that was never happening with the roster we had. You know, the Pistons missed out. They traded their first round pick in 17-18 draft. It's part of that pick. So they missed out on, I think Pistons might have been able to take Miles Bridges, but, you know, I mean, that kind of, with the way his career's turned out, I don't think anyone really cares about that anymore. So all I'll say, shout out to Blake. He pretty much had his best career of his season with the Pistons. And yeah, I'd like to think most Pistons fans now can sit back and just appreciate that season, because I feel like a lot of the time in sports we throw around like the saying, like, we're going to war, or like, you know, he put his body on the line, or that, this and that. And a lot of times I think it's like not really warranted, but I truly feel like Blake in that playoff series, like, he literally risked his career to play in 2 games the Pistons had no business winning. So true competitor. And yeah, shout out to Blake for a fantastic career overall, and just you know, a fun couple of years with the Pistons. So yeah, drop your favorite Blake moment below. Love to hear. I'm going to try to post some content tonight or tomorrow, just for his time in the Pistons. So keep your eyes peeled on Twitter and on Instagram, because yeah, there's some really great moments he had with the Pistons. So yeah, one final time, shout out to Blake. Let me know your favorite moments of Blake Griffin in Detroit. And until next video, as always, go Pistons.